Hello everyone, welcome back. After fuzzing, we will continue with mocking. We are not going to mock anyone, but what we will learn is something about mocking a mail server using GreenMail. And Jens Knipper is going to show us in a very practical way how to test the sending of email by using a mock mail server. Who is Jens? Jens is an experienced and passionate full-stack Java software engineer at OpenValue. And over the years, he has gained a lot of experience with both front-end and back-end development. He loves to try out new things and work with new technologies. And fortunately for us, he also likes to share his experiences with others, entirely in the tradition of OpenValue. Well, I would say questions again via the chat. And now, without further ado, the floor to Jens.
Yeah, hi. As Garrett mentioned, I'm Jens. I'm senior software engineer at OpenValue. And in general, I'm interested in all kinds of technology and always looking for new things to try. And at some point, I was wondering, how do you comfortably test the sending and receiving of email notifications? So I was looking for something to solve the issue, and that's how I stumbled upon GreenMail. And now I want to tell you how you can do it yourself. So what can be your motivation to even test email notifications? I found a nice image with some information about the email sequence of Casper, the mattress shop. And yeah, email seems to be a huge marketing channel for them. And in this sequence, you can see different kind of triggers, condition, and in generally beautifully styled emails. For example, if you abandon your cart, you get a follow-up mail after 1 day with a discount. So when you're relying so heavily on marketing, on email as a sales funnel, testing is probably vital for you as a company, because you probably make a lot of money doing it. Yeah, when you start testing, and before you even do that, you should have a look at how to test which features. And when you're doing that, before you do that, if you're not going to do that, you might end up with a lot of long-running tests, because people tend to write higher class tests because it's easier. Unit testing might need some structuring for the code or things like that, and end-to-end tests or manual tests in general are easier for people to do. And the test pyramid is actually a good place to get started. There you can see different kinds of tests. Tests at the bottom are cheap and easy, cheap and fast, and the further up you go, the slower and more expensive the tests get. That's because tests in the upper stages test more functionality at once, so they also require more resources, and the resources need some time to start up. And depending on your architecture, for example, when you're in a microservice environment or something else, the test pyramid might look a little different. But I think this is one that makes sense in email context. When we apply the test pyramid to email notifications, we have to find out how we want to test which things. And in general, manual testing is labor intense and should be avoided where possible. But often when you're dealing with heavily styled HTML mails, you cannot avoid it, because you maybe want to do tests on different clients, browsers, or even operating system, because the styling might look a little different on each. End-to-end tests should, in my opinion, only be used as mock tests in email context, and you might want to add them to test some happy path or something else. Integration tests check the integration of multiple components. For example, in email context, it's the communication with the mail server, which includes the sending and receiving of mails. In unit tests, you're testing single components only. And like we saw in the Casper example, that might be things like triggers or mail content. And for example, a Casper trigger was triggering a mail after a purchase, and we want to ensure that this one's working. One general thing about the test pyramids, if you have a failure in a higher class test, it's usually assigned, and not in a low class test, so only in a high class test. It's usually a sign that you have to change something. It either means that your test is too sensitive, so you have a false positive, or it means you're not having enough lower level tests, so you might want to add some more unit tests. So before we look into how an optimal solution might look like, I'd like to show you how setups in current projects look like. And for that, I asked some colleagues, and I also used my personal experience to gather some information. And yeah, manual testing essentially boils down into using no mail server at all, or to use the production mail server. Yeah, the first strategy is to use no mail server at all and to let the app crash, or to silently swallow the error. And that's not a good strategy because you can't test anything. The next strategy looks a little better. It's to write all emails into the log file, and yeah, it's not that bad. You can start testing, but you have to search the log depending on your application. This and the amount you're logging, this might take some time. And also, you're not able to test HTML mails because they don't get rendered in the log. Yeah, using the production server probably sounds as dangerous as it is, and the danger of emails leaking from to customers or someone else is a lot higher. And you have to ensure you always have a connection to your mail server, so you, for example, can work from train or whatever. And you're also allocating resources that might be needed in production. So imagine you're programming and you have some infinite loop or whatever, and you're blocking the resources of your production environment, and no customer gets any emails. Or maybe you have an email provider and you have quotas, and you're using up all the quotas that can cost a lot of money. So that's probably something you want to avoid. One strategy is to change all email addresses. So before importing new data, you change all the email addresses to your own, for example. You still have to be careful. You have to change them all the time, and you make sure they always get changed. And when you add a new user or whatever, make sure you're adding an email address that's probably yours or one of your colleagues. Another approach is using a list of allowed recipients. So there's maybe a list of people, of developers, which are allowed to get mails, and you have to change your code according to it. So these people get mails in certain environments. It also means you get the notifications from your colleagues, and in large teams, you might get a lot of notifications, so it might be disturbing for you. Another thing I especially don't like is that your code behaves differently in production and the local environment, and it impairs your reproducibility. So it might become hard to trace bugs. And you're also implementing changes, and that's a change you probably want to test. When we look into automated testing, sorry, I didn't see really much. There were no end-to-end tests, no integration tests. There were some unit tests to test trigger conditions and mail content, so the basic stuff, but not really much more. Yeah, now that we know what our actual pain points are, we can take a look at GreenMail and what it offers to us. GreenMail was initially released around 2006, so it has a certain maturity, and it's still actively maintained. All emails remain local, which prevents leaks to the outside. But when I asked my colleagues, the most common cause I encountered was that they were applying the wrong configuration. So, for example, running the production configuration on your local environment. And GreenMail is not going to stop that. It might make it a little less probably, but it's not going to stop you. And there's two ways to use GreenMail, either as a dependency for integration or end-to-end testing, or you can use it as a standalone mock server to test your emails manually. And we'll have a look at both of them in the next step, which is a small demo. So I'm setting up my local development environment with Docker Compose. I've got a Compose file with two services. The first one is GreenMail in the standalone version. And here we use it as a mock mail server. And you can see that GreenMail supports all common mail protocols, including the SSL variants. And we should keep in mind that all the ports have an offset of 3000. So if you want to connect to them, we'll have to remember that. In my environment, I'm also using a webmail client. I'm using Roundcube for that. And just to read and send mails. It's in the same network, it's GreenMail. So the host name is just the service name. If you want to connect some other clients later, we have to use localhost. But I'll show you later how to connect, for example, Thunderbird to it. Next step is the POM file. Here we are integrating GreenMail for a second time. This time as a dependency, and we'll use it for integration and end-to-end testing. I'm also using the OWASP encoder because I'm testing the receiving of mails, and I want to make sure to sanitize all incoming mails. Another thing I use is Selenium, which is a nice tool for end-to-end testing. In the application properties, I configure the mail server, connecting to the mail server using Imap and Smtp. And there's also a mail address in there, which I use to send and receive mails. So that's the sender and the receiver. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to show you some manual testing now. And for that, I'll start the Docker environment and also the application. Seems like it's up, and I'll have to get the right window. The application is a simple note-taking app. And you can create notes and send it to yourself as an email, but you can also create notes by sending an email to the specified email address, which is specified in the application properties. So I'll just get started, type in a title and some text. And as an email, I use my OpenValue email address, just in case it gets wrong. I created, I had hit send it by mail. And next thing, I can use Roundcube to check the mail that comes in. And I get prompted for a username and password. And there's a nice feature coming into play from GreenMail. Users are automatically created either when they get an email or when the user tries to log in. And the login is always the email address. So I can just paste in the email address into the username and the password field. You should be aware on your local environment, this is okay. But when you're using GreenMail on a publicly available server or environment, like your staging or test environment, you should at least protect it with a reverse proxy and some basic authentication. Otherwise, leaks are possible, so someone could read the mails. Or if you offer some kind of password reset functionality or something else, someone could actually take over users for that environment. Yeah, after login, we see the mail. The mail title is the title we specified, and the text is also the text we specified. It's to my mail address, and yeah, obviously the mail sending works, and I can test it locally. And I told you we could also create notes by sending emails, and that's what we're going to do now. I send an email to the email address, and yeah, maybe call it a little different, title2 and text2, and hit send. When I go back to the application and refresh it, there appears the new note. So that's it about manual testing. You saw what the application can do, and now we want to get into integration testing and how to ensure that the email functionality in our application is working. First, I want to show you how the my client for sending emails looks like. I'm using Java Mail from Spring, which takes a lot of work. So what I'm doing here is mainly some configuration, and there's not much logic in there. So testing this is probably not that interesting. But if we have a look at the client for receiving mails, and there I use Java Xmail, which is a lot more low level than the Spring Mail. And here I have to connect to the server, get the mails, close the connection, and also want to get only the newest mails. So mails that haven't been read, and I have to flag the read mails as the unread mails as read that way. So I'm always getting the newest emails. And yeah, the receiving client is used in a scheduler. So every 3 seconds, the mails get picked up, and the notes are created from it. It's later important for the end-to-end tests. Yeah, I'll just show you the client, the test for the send client. And here we're using GreenMail as a dependency. And I'm running the test in the test profile. So my ports for the automated tests don't collide with my manual testing. I'm using static ports here, but you might want to consider using random ports if you use the CI/CD pipeline with parallel builds. But in this context, I think static ports are enough. And in here, we tell GreenMail to configure an Imap and an Smtp server. We're creating our user for sending and receiving mails, and we start the mock server. Then I create some random content for mail and use my regular mail client to send it. So I don't have to mock my mail functionality or anything else. I can just use my regular mail client and hit send. When mail has been sent, I'm using GreenMail to get incoming mails. And I'll tell GreenMail to wait for a maximum of 5 seconds or to get one mail. So whichever occurs first, and this might end a little earlier. And we see that in a second when I execute the code. So it shouldn't take 5 seconds, hopefully. And yeah, in the end, I get the received messages and compare the content to the one I've sent. So let's execute it once. And it should run, I think, around 1 second, or even faster. But it's still a lot slower than unit test. So consider where you use GreenMail, because it might really slow your application down. Yeah, the next step is the receive test. And here we once again set up GreenMail, use an Imap and SMTP server because we send and receive, and start the mock server, generate some random mail content. And now the first difference is that we're not sending an email with our own mail client, but we're using the GreenMail utilities to send an email. Which we in the end receive with our regular mail client. And we assert once again that the content in there is equal. I run it once more. And we should see that it runs equally fast and also passes. I can also show you some end-to-end tests. I use Selenium to access the application, and basically these end-to-end tests test what we did manually before. So the first one is just I send a mail and expect that a node in the application is created. And for the test, there is a setup which starts GreenMail and also starts the Selenium driver. And because I have two tests in this class, I also do some little cleanups between the tests. I told you the first test is about sending an email and expecting that the node is created. So I use the GreenMail util to send a mail. Then I need the thread to sleep because I want the scheduler to pick up the mail. Start up Selenium and assert that the mail content we sent is now used to create a node, and we can see it on the application. The same with creating a node by hand and sending it to yourself. It's a little more because we're doing a little more on the UI. And we simply access the application, fill out the different fields, and submit it. We expect that a node is created, hit the send button, and like in the integration test, we wait for the incoming mail and compare the content. So this looks really a lot like integration testing. We can use GreenMail to use for integration and end-to-end testing, and it's fairly easy. One thing I didn't show you yet is how to connect GreenMail to your to another mail client, and I can show you how to connect it to Thunderbird. And it's fairly easy. You just add a new mail account, paste an email address, but now you have to configure it manually. The server is localhost, and now you just have to change the ports. Remember, all ports have an offset of 3000. It complains because we're not using the SSL variant, but in the local setup, I think this is okay. And when we get into the inbox, we see the mail we sent, we received, and also the mail we sent. Gerrit, I think you had a question.
No, I didn't have a question. I just was wondering, maybe one question in between, how difficult it is to integrate this into existing projects.
It's fairly easy. You just have to change your application properties. So for manual testing, when you did things like using no mail server at all, or use the production server, just change your configuration and maybe remove the code you did for testing, and you're done.
Okay.
And I didn't saw any integration or end-to-end testing with Imap before, so you're starting on the green field there. So it's not much effort. You just have to get started.
Okay. Are you ready for other questions or?
Yeah, maybe we shift them to the end. I'd like to sum up what we just saw. So we get back to the slides, and let's sum up what we just saw by using GreenMail. And we saw some examples for manual and integration testing, also UI end-to-end testing, sorry. And yeah, unit testing with GreenMail is not possible because GreenMail is not intended to do that. But in the best case, you already have some tests which are in email context, which are covered by unit tests. Yeah, the next thing, if we remember our experiences in manual testing, all of them are gone. So manual testing is really easy. You're free to use any mail client you want, and you don't have to be afraid of email leaks. And yeah, you also don't have to build any extra logic for your local environment. So everything is really easy to reproduce. Also, everything remains local, and it solves all the problems concerning that. So you can work from wherever you want. You don't get your colleagues' mails, and if you do an error, and no one's going to see that. So yeah, that's a good thing. And yeah, if you want to read a little more, we add the link to the slides and the demo code in the descriptions, so you don't have to take notes of that. And yeah, GreenMail has a nice website with a lot of tutorial code and some examples. It's probably a good idea to look into that. And if you want to read a little more about the email marketing of Casper, there's a great article of indie hackers about it. And if the test pyramid is new for you, Martin Fowler has a great wiki entry about that. So Garrett, let's get started with the questions.
Yeah, we will give the audience some time to type in questions if they have some. In the meantime, I've got another question that is, so you've shown GreenMail in a Java context. How easy can it be used, or can it be used at all for other programming languages?
So for other programming languages, you can use it for manual testing. Because mail protocols are open, and yeah, server and client don't have to be of the same language. Yeah, so manual testing is possible. Automated testing is not possible because you have to use GreenMail as a dependency. So probably can use it in JVM languages, but nothing else. GreenMail offers a REST API, but it's not that functional yet. So you can do only some basic stuff, but maybe in the future, it will also offer some further functionality, and you're free to use it with other languages as well.
Okay, another question from the chat. Why can't you use GreenMail in a unit test? Wouldn't test containers help here? Sure, it makes it more like an integration test, but could it still be used?
Yeah, sure. You can use it in test containers, but I'd say it's not a unit test anymore because you're actually using different components. And unit test, in my opinion, would only be, for example, you have the trigger for a mail and you want to test the trigger, or you have a templating engine for an email and you have some logic in there, and you say, okay, I want this text to be in there. But when you add GreenMail, you probably have a lot more. You're generating the mail, you're sending it, and then you're checking on the mail server if it is on the mail server. And that's, in my opinion, integration test. So it's more like a definition thing.
Okay, thank you. I'm checking the chat if there are any more questions coming in. There's always a small delay. Yeah, I've got another question. Could you use GreenMail to test mass and email marketing campaigns? And how much mail can it handle?
I didn't do any load testing, but it's probably limited to your local resources.
Okay. Okay, so you think it can be used? Well, it sounds logical that it can be used, but okay. If I look at the chat, don't think there's any much more coming in. From my side, big thank you, Jens. I heard the talk before in an earlier stage, but it improved. So if it improves every time you do it, well, something great is about to happen. That brings us to the end of our meetup.